Hi there, welcome back. We're still doing our interview with Naomi and Betsy, and I'm especially excited to ask them about their experience with women who have experienced conception, pregnancy, and birth with a background of trauma, abuse, rape, anything like that. So yeah, let's just get into a bit of a discussion about all of that and what you've experienced with your clients and with women you've known with that background and how you feel it affected their experience.
My experience is that there's trauma that you know about and there's trauma that's been repressed. And in the birthing experience, either way it can affect it. It affects you emotionally, it affects you physically. It affects hormone levels. It increases the fear, flight phenomenon that happens during childbirth. And it can affect how you approach motherhood, parenthood. It can affect how you approach birth. I've seen women go to a whole different place during birth and just kind of check out during birth, which is sad to watch. This is their journey and their process, and if I can help in any way, I'm there. I'm not there to relive that experience with them. I'm not a counselor. I'm a midwife, and I can help them through their journey of birth. I would like to see more women maybe addressing their trauma and getting the counseling before birth, but that's ideal, and that doesn't happen. Some people don't remember until they're birthing, and that's the sad part. But I'm there to identify that situation and just to assist the best way I can. And we talked about intuition, and it's intuitive, what I can do for a person that's gone through some sexual trauma or abuse, help them through the birth process. Mm-hmm. And if things come up that they need to address at a different date, then give them the resources, have available the resources for helping them through that process.
Absolutely.
I think there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think midwifery care is a perfect space for a person who has suffered trauma to be in, because as midwives, we are led by our intuition. Our care is longer, right? So you're coming in for 45-minute visits, an hour-long visits, where those things can unfold. Something I say to everybody who enters care is, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum is a really vulnerable time. It's especially vulnerable for people who've experienced that. And because you and I are just getting to know each other, you don't have to share anything if you don't want. I'm just creating that space for you to come to me and share when you're ready. I want to provide really good care, and I provide it better when I have pieces to the puzzle, So
Yeah.
I think that the way that people experience it, there's like a spectrum. There's not like, one certain way that everyone's going to experience it. Birth can either be incredibly empowering, whether you have suffered from, abusive parents growing up, or there was any kind of like neglect, and then all of a sudden you're a parent, and a parent when your baby, is still inside, and you start parenting then, right? It's not as soon as a baby's
Absolutely.
born, but you can start healing, you can start forgiving, or you can get mad as hell. Right?
Finding forgiveness for yourself
for
and the
yourself
world and
yeah.
self-love,
Totally.
self-acceptance.
Yeah.
And your humanity again, which is stripped from us in these experiences.
Exactly.
We're told.
And
there's no right way to do this.
No.
when you counsel someone in the, what sort of birthing experience you want, leaving it open to what they need at the time.
Yeah.
And there are women that will do a home birth and do fine. There are other women that may need an epidural to get them through it.
Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
that's okay too. And that's where I felt my job was,
Yeah.
to introduce that to women and to be a gentle birth attendant for those women that were traumatized, that needed a different birth experience. Then breastfeeding may be very confrontation that they're not able to get through without some.
Well, and you may not be prepared. You don't know until you experience it, and then
Right.
you get triggered. And
Right.
I remember having that experience just at the very beginning. I remember that first moment Selah latched, and there was a sensation that washed over me that was mixed with positivity, but it was. I guess it was literally a bit of a trigger, and I chose to work past it. And it didn't take a bunch of time, which means it wasn't a deep trigger. It wasn't something that had really affected me that deeply, but there were other things, and you just don't know until that baby stimulates that emotion, or sometimes your husband, your caregiver, if you're traumatized by your caregiver. It's,
And that's part of the spectrum, you
Yeah.
know. So you have this healing side over here, but then you also have over here on this other side where you can be, it can be a very dark place. And I can tell you, when I went to breastfeed my first baby, there was a resounding no. And that's as far as it went. And so I didn't actually breastfeed any of my children. And I think that there's a stigma in the natural birthing communities where, we have these ideas where, it has to be all natural. You have to, no epidural, water birth by candlelight with Enya playing in the background. You have to nurse your children. And if you don't do any of that, then you don't get to be part of our club.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit.
Yeah.
That is absolutely
It is
bullshit.
bullshit.
You cannot, you can't look at a woman who
And
is...
your baby will be damaged from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You won't love them. They
That
won't love
puts
you.
a lot of weight
Yeah.
on women to have this perfect
Yes.
candlelit
We have to
birth
Experience from start to finish.
We have to stop.
Well, look at all the happy pregnancies that we're encouraged to have. And either that or some cultures expect a nasty pregnancy. Well, you're allowed to complain your whole 9 months. Absolutely, you're allowed. But should we have one stigma one way or the other? Well, if you're a happy pregnant lady, well, we look down on that. If you're a negative pregnant lady, we look down on that. Just accept whatever is experienced.
And I mean, there are different tools for different situations. Like you were talking about an epidural. If a woman is experiencing those sensations in her body that are re-triggering her, get that girl
She's
an
holding
epidural. Get her an epidural.
Yeah,
That's what it's there for.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
absolutely.
You can have an empowering birth experience with an epidural.
Yeah.
I know I'm not supposed to say that as a home birth midwife, but
Absolutely.
you can, because, our goal isn't to have hippie home births with Enya playing in the background. It is to have empowering birth experiences.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that happens in the hospital. I
Well,
think most times it can happen at home.
That
but
may be our perception of birth, but
Totally.
it's not the client's. The
Right.
client is the driving force here.
Yes.
And it's what they want to experience. And we're just there to kind of tease out their thoughts and try to help them articulate what they want.
Well, and sometimes these people, these women, people who come from, sometimes they come from a culture that really keeps them under thumb in one way or another, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And many women I've met, even just online while running Birth Warrior, they've explained to me in so many words that they're kept. That their culture, basically, their community, doesn't allow them to find that innate, intuitive voice. There's many different religious groups and cultural groups and even just countries that keep women down. And I think it really comes down to midwives to be culturally sensitive, sensitive to people's backgrounds, and find ways to speak to them and get them to find that power in themselves in their own language. It's so important, which is why Indigenous midwives, African American midwives, education for every different group of people to become midwives if they want is so important. Because there's different abuses and traumas that go into each different community. Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think if we get back to the ceremonial
Yes.
birthing concept, that all of the barriers and the blocks can fade away eventually. That I don't care if you're in a hospital, if you're having a C-section, or you're at home, or in a stream somewhere in the woods, it can be ceremonial. It can be, like I've said before, rite of passage.
Yeah.
And it needs to be a rite of passage, because thinking about we are creating a miracle. There's a miracle happening. There is a universe being created within us in the future to birth. And I think when we start refocusing on that, some of that trauma can kind of melt away. Not that it will be gone because of that, but it can help you bring your focus back.
It can totally be
no
therapeutic.
limit. It can be therapeutic. Yeah.
How would you encourage a woman if you suspect she's experienced some trauma, sexual abuse, especially if you just suspect it or she hasn't told you the whole story? How would you encourage her to seek a more transformative, healing, positive birth experience for herself?
She would have to share.
She would have to share.
Well, I think that's one of the options, right? For me, of course, it's easier if she goes, this, and this happened.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Being aware of it herself, and making us aware of it, of course, is the easiest first step.
I don't feel like she necessarily has to share with me, but I think to speak is a good healing moment, to be able to verbalize it. Whether it's with a therapist, with a partner, just with herself, with her divine spirit within herself, to share, to speak the truth. I think that's good.
That release is so important. It's the
It
only
is.
step to shaking, and it's the only first step to shaking it off your shoulder, really.
And I'm a proponent of meditation. And I think that I offer meditation to women, and particularly women that have had trauma, past trauma. I think being able to focus on your breath and the energy of your breath, and instead of on the tapes that are playing, that are replaying in your head, there's this primal place that we've come away from because we're so civilized now. We're civilized, and
Right.
we can have tea and not talk about parts of our bodies and stuff. And I think there's a reconnection that you have to have with your body is natural. Your body is a miracle, and it's a vessel. And when you give birth, you are closest to your source than ever. And reconnecting with that through meditation is helpful. I think that I have seen in my experience that trauma victims have been helped a lot by that. And just get out of that left brain.
And I think when I'm thinking of women that maybe weren't conscious of their traumas or didn't share it with me, and how we were able to help them during birth, because we do come in and stay with them, right? We're not like at the hospital where a nurse will come in and check on you, do your vital signs, and the OB who just comes in at the end and catches babies.
Yeah.
Like, we are with you. I mean, being a midwife means with women. And so being able to be in the room and watching how she moves her body. I was at a birth this week where the mom and dad were in the bathroom, and I was in there with them, and some male came in the room, or not in the room, came in the house, and she heard his voice, and immediately she stopped and said, "Who is that? Get him out of here." And this went from a woman who was relaxed in her space,
Yeah.
you know, her and her husband doing their thing, to instantly the fear, the adrenaline coming in. Who is that? What's going on?
A need for knowledge,
Yeah.
a need for being able to protect
And
yourself.
so, you know, midwives are their guardian, right? So I would he's got to go. He's got to go. Go. You can't be in here.
Yeah.
We'll call you soon. And as soon as he left, she had her baby like 5 minutes later.
Wow.
But she was not going to have that baby with him there. Like, that wall went up.
Right.
You know, and I don't know that she had any trauma, but I know that was not going to happen.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Birth is such a sacred space, and I find, you know, the people that were supposed to be in my experience happened to be able to be at my experience. And I've seen my birth with Adira. You know, I had friends that, you know, friends that I didn't even know how that birth would affect them and their journey as women. They are not mothers. One of them is pregnant now, and I wonder, did my birth help her become, she was suffering endometriosis, and she was there to watch Selah, and, you know, she told me later, I've never seen anything like that. And she meant a home birth where a woman was growling and kissing and touching and feeling at ease in her own body. And, you know, this is coming from my background being with Adira's birth. I was well aware of my flashbacks after Selah, but in Selah's birth, I didn't know. I didn't know that I was about to experience those flashbacks. And I know I'm about to ramble on the topic of not explaining to our midwives what our traumas are.
You might not know.
I didn't know what I would experience through flashbacks after, you know, 4 or 6 months postpartum. I didn't know to tell my midwives, but I knew I was guarded, and I knew I spent the hour-long appointments every single month telling them about my anger at my mother and my pain about my mother not being there. And, you know, I find that each birth opens up the chapter of healing that we need in that time. And isn't it
prepares
interesting?
you to be a mother for that baby,
For that
in
baby.
that moment. Yep, absolutely.
And that's a whole nother video, how each baby is so suited to the kind of wild primal nature that comes out of me. And it starts in pregnancy. It really starts in pregnancy. If you think that when you turn on those candles and you're in labor, you're at 3 centimeters and you're just starting and you feel like you're going to have this romantic experience starting then, no, you need to build that intimacy with your husband. You need to build that intimacy with your partner. You need to build that intimacy in yourself and your midwife, and build your team ahead of time and really dream about your experience. And that doesn't mean require it to be exactly like you want, but
It's never like you
never.
want.
And it's never.
well, first of all, mine were.
It's never perfect.
But
And we
I was
already-
lucky.
Yes.
Yeah, I was lucky.
My experience, personally and professionally, is it's never how you think it's going to be. It's so much better. You know,
Well, it's what it needs to be.
Yeah.
it's what it needs to be,
Yeah.
and it's just this
It's
wild.
going to throw you curves.
It's this
sometimes.
wild roller coaster ride,
Yeah.
and it's so exciting. And then
And
sometimes
this
it's kind of
perfect-
boring, and then exhilarating, and
Yeah.
it's all that in a bag of chips.
Yeah.
People with
Yeah.
perfect birth plans that come in. I've had
3 or 4 pages long.
3, maybe
It was
even
3.
a book.
Oh no.
Of this is the way it's going to be, and I think, okay, take a deep breath,
Yeah.
because probably not,
Yeah.
but it will be close,
Mm-hmm.
but probably not in letting go. I mean, there's that word, that phrase is used so much,
But that, you know, that
but it's true. You've got to let go and let your body,
Absolutely.
and
And trust your birth.
it will
That would
and trust that you
worthy
will
of
go down
trust.
the path you need.
But
to
that
go
would
down.
be a cue for me that if somebody came in with a 3 or 4 or 5 page birth plan,
That they're guarding something.
that they want so much control, like
Yes.
that would be a red flag. Like
Yeah.
there might be
is.
something. There might be
That's
something
fascinating.
to that.
That's something I guess
You know?
would have been easy to see in me. You know, why does
Or
she
if-
require that much safety and that much
yeah,
control?
yeah.
But here's
There's
what
a
I'll say
reason
as a
behind
mother.
it.
What?
There's a reason
Right.
behind it.
Well, and it
It's
doesn't go
neither
away.
bad or good.
It doesn't
It's
go
just-
away. I'll never be able to, I won't say never because I'm strong enough to make it through anything, but I I struggle to see a time where I will feel comfortable letting a doctor do what they wish with me. I struggle to see a time where I will let any man be able to make a call for my body without me having pretty much full control to veto his decision, which means for me, and for the people viewing you, where they say, oh yeah, me too. Well, maybe you should strive to educate yourself on an out-of-hospital birth, birth center birth, home birth, and see if you're well suited for that, because it doesn't go away. We can find ways to understand people may not hurt us, people may take good care of us, even if they're a man, or even if they're a woman, or but it is something to understand in yourself, that, to find a birth plan that.
But giving up control is there's several ways of giving up control and retaining control. There's a certain amount of control that you need to survive. Control of a physician coming in and doing what they want. You should never give that up, that you are in control of your body.
Thanks, Betsy.
At that point. No, I mean, truly.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. The control I'm talking about giving up is the control of nature.
Right.
That you don't have control over what the universe is planning for you.
Yes.
So it's more of a sense of having trust in your own body and in your own intuitive sense. Having trust that you can do this.
Yeah.
That's kind of the control that I'm talking about. That
Absolutely.
faith. It's more of a faith. If you
In
want to call it
yourself, in your
faith
body,
instead
and,
of control.
Nature. Yeah.
That you have faith in letting go.
And you have to have faith in your birth team.
Absolutely.
Not just your midwives, but everybody who's going to be there. Because I tell folks that what's most important is, who can you show your O face to? Right? Like, who can you feel unself-conscious and vulnerable with? And if there's anybody in the room that you can't do that with, they should probably not be there.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Because you can't open up and let those sounds out either way.
You can't.
Right.
And when you're in labor, you transcend to this other realm of consciousness. Like, you go out amongst the stars.
It is true.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to trust that everybody there
is going to take care of your body when
Is
you're
gonna
gone.
And that's what the
It's
doula
so
and the
important.
midwife,
Yes.
that they're the
It's so
gatekeepers.
important.
Yeah.
I remember when I delivered Adira and I said, I did it. I didn't leave at all. I felt everything. It was beautiful, something like that. And it was because I said that because I'd actually stayed present, pretty darn present the whole time. But with Selah, I went out.
To a different
It was
place.
part of, even the most positive birth experiences have an element of how our brain experiences trauma. It doesn't feel like trauma if it's a positive experience. It doesn't feel that way, but our brains and the chemical reaction can kind of say like, oh, this is a big change for my body, and I'm gonna detach a little bit.
Yeah.
And for those of us that have learned disassociation, it's a learned thing, and I experienced it with Selah. And the biggest problem with that was, I can watch the video and see her head be out and see me be like freaked out, but I felt like that was happening to my body. I wasn't bringing it on. I wasn't the power behind that birth experience. But with Selah, after the flashbacks, after the trauma counseling, after knowing my midwives for the second pregnancy and knowing how well they had taken care of me at the first birth experience, that was like the key to being able to stay present. And I think it's because the realm of consciousness we go to, we do need to trust that the people, subconsciously, that the people left behind, including our partners, hint, hint, are going to take excellent, amazing, sensitive, wise care of us. And I will ask an obvious question to me, but not to everyone else. Can you leave a care provider at any time to find a new care provider?
Yes, you can.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
Okay.
You got to give us time.
Don't let the screen door hit you in the butt.
We have to, like, the more time we're able to spend with each other, like, of course,
Yes,
that's better.
of course.
But, when I worked in Seattle, like, I remember having people come in and having their baby, like, 3 or 4 days later. Like, it gave us
There
just
you go.
enough time to, like, review their records, make sure everything was on the up and up, that they were appropriate for midwifery care and birth
Absolutely.
center birth. Yeah, like literally like 3 days later they had their baby.
And
It's
in our-
never too late.
In our private practice, Alina and I had many transfers at 30 weeks, 36 weeks. I had someone that transferred that was due in 2 days. You know, you got to put a lot together in that time to
Right.
get to know them and be comfortable with them. But if they were if they were willing to transfer 2 days before their due date,
You were willing
Then-
to take them.
you know, they needed to be gone from where they were
Yeah.
because they didn't have that.
You've got to be brave enough to, if you're brave enough to go into birth, you also have to be brave enough to find the provider that's right for you and find the provider that's right for your background. And please don't let anyone dissuade you. And if it is your care provider, run. If they're dissuading you from finding care that's more sensitive to your experience. But whatever birth you're looking for is possible within the realm of reason. Because I had a birth outside overlooking a volcano, and I labored with my donkeys, and I was 45 minutes from a hospital. And I was really lucky to find care providers that allowed me to do that. And most won't, and definitely not everybody will. And it was really important for me. I don't know if I would be where I am. I don't know if Birth Warrior would be here. I don't know if my children would be here as who they are if I didn't have that experience the way I needed it. And I can tell you, hospital birth was wrong for me. Would you agree?
Yeah, probably not.
Absolutely. So, and hospital birth is right and perfect for some people. So please just know, feel free to mirror me here. Find the care provider that's right for you. Find the team that's right for you. Find a doula that's right for you, and make sure your spouse is being good to you too.
Yeah, we have a
and
lot of
the-
folks check out, we'll transfer over care around, 28, 29 weeks because now they're starting to see their care providers more often and they're like, this just isn't feeling right, and,
Yeah.
and so, yes.
Do you dread those
And
appointments?
those
Do you
care
start to feel
providers may
uncomfortable?
not be honest with them until the end,
Right.
if they ever
Oh,
are.
especially
Awful.
especially VBACs, because at first
Yes.
they're like, oh sure, you can totally have a VBAC.
Yeah.
And then around 28, 29 weeks, they're feeling your baby like, oh, this is a really big baby. We're never gonna
Always.
have a baby. And then we get folks and we do VBACs, so come on over. But yeah, you absolutely deserve, and your baby deserves, to have the people that believe in you.
Right.
And on the flip side,
know?
there are women that are appropriate for physicians and want that kind of care.
They wouldn't be comfortable in our care.
Detached.
Yes,
absolutely.
They don't want.
Yep.
Yes.
They don't
They won't
want
no will.
Those that aren't, yes.
Yeah.
There's an experience that is more suitable for MD, OBGYN care, even planned cesarean births can be exactly what you want. If that's exactly what you
Yep.
want, then that's exactly what you want. So yeah, we're all very pro
Yeah.
those experiences too, if that's really what's going to help you be the woman, the wife, the mother, the person that you need to be, for you. And so yeah, it's how dramatically though trauma, rape, abuse, even just verbal abuse, right, can affect how we feel about ourselves and our bodies when we're in that moment.
And you may have an experience of people pressuring you to do, because that's what people are doing, water birth, home
Right.
birth, or whatever. And you may be being pressured even the other way to have a hospital birth when you really want a home birth. It's all about getting in contact with what your inner self,
Yes.
your source is telling you that is most comfortable for you. So I have seen women at a home birth that all of a sudden stall in labor, that really only are there because their family wanted them to
Thank
be,
you.
and that was what was happening in the community.
Yes.
And it has to be right for you. If you've got this little nagging voice telling you,
do something
I
differently.
don't know, I'm really hesitant, and you can't even articulate that. But there's something that is just you can't even speak to. Then you need to sit and think and talk it out and decide if that's where you want to be, and just say, this is going to be my experience.
Yeah.
And I love the input from all my family, but this is the way I've got to do it.
is interesting, that cultural appropriateness, cultural, you know, the cultural norm around you, even just, I come from the Midwest, so the cultural norm is hospital births, and there's a bunch of home births, there's a bunch of, you know, home birthers, but it's easier to become an outlaw midwife there, I'll say it that way. There's a much less, there's much less of a culture of freedom there and acceptance of whatever birth you're about. And if you're a bit of a weirdo like me, you're chased out of there with pitchforks. So I'm glad I came here, but you know, thank goodness there's an element of home birth available in most of the US. I think an element of it. But it's not everywhere. And as far as rights go, rights to birth however you want, that is really limited.
Yeah, Washington has this great every provider law, which states that anybody who has a license in their profession, insurances have to pay for. It's very, very unique to Washington. So that means that CPMs and LMs are reimbursed by insurance and by Medicaid specifically, where they're not in other states.
Right.
You know, I worked in Nevada for many years, and the only people who could afford a home birth were people who, you know, had some money, like middle class white people. You know, that's who could afford it.
Right.
Whereas up here, there is so much more access to midwifery care. It's kind of like the birth nirvana.
It is.
I think so
the birth
anyways.
nirvana.
You know.
I never thought a culture like this existed until I came here, and I thought, well, how serendipitous that I'm here and could become pregnant here and become birth warrior here was crazy.
Yeah.
So blessed. Well, thank you so much for being here, ladies.
Thank you.
Really excited to talk about these topics, and we will have more topics coming. Again, just a reminder, find the birth warrior in you, and find a provider that will help you in your transformational journey. Find someone that'll birth you as much as you're birthing the baby that you're about to. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
End tape.